What's up, Guerrilla Social Workers? Welcome to the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast with your host, Jeff Fire Bunny Moore, and yours faithfully, Mace Warren. Jeff and I are both licensed clinical social workers who specialize in providing forensic psychotherapy to clients involved in the criminal justice system. We truly enjoy the work that we do, and we love sharing our insights with you guys. Thank you so much for your ongoing listenership and subscriptions. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Alpha Counseling and Treatment. Alpha Counseling provides clinical services, case management, and peer support for justice-involved clients, including substance use, sex offense, and really all other court-ordered clinical care. Check out the website at utahsbesttherapy.com today to get started with your personal recovery. Jeff and I sit down today to talk about communicating assertively. We're posting this podcast around the holidays, so we just got through with Thanksgiving, coming up on Christmas. You know, during that time, we often find ourselves in situations with family and friends that lead to conflict. You got your weird aunt coming over. She's talking about her weird political ideologies. You guys get in a fight. The family never talks again for the next year. Maybe you enjoy that. Maybe you don't. I don't know. Either way, we hope that this talk helps you guys kind of weather that storm. Communicating assertively, it's a necessary skill anyway when you're dealing with conflict or trying to establish boundaries. So it can be used in really all walks of life, right? Really enjoyed this discussion. We hope you do too. Thanks again, guys, for listening. Please subscribe. Please share with a friend. That always helps us reach a wider and wider audience. And we like the feedback we receive from you guys in terms of what the content of the podcast is. Thanks again, guys. Talk to you soon. Oh, did you hear that? That was the end of the intro music.
Oh, so we just kind of jump right in.
Super inspirational. That was, I don't know what that tone was, but yeah, that was.
Well, the last intro music, you let it play for a bit, got jamming out a little bit. Forgot I was listening to a podcast.
Yeah, some of those aren't bad, man.
Jazzy little tune.
Jazzy?
A jazzy, not like jazz music.
Oh,
jazzy is.
Jazzine or jazzy?
Jazzy.
Oh,
yeah, it's jazzy,
like DJ Jazzy Jeff.
Yeah, like that.
Nice. I like it. Well, how was your Thanksgiving, man?
Low key.
Yeah,
nice. Yeah, dude. I had lasagna.
Oh, dude,
it wasn't turkey lasagna.
Good for you.
Hell yeah.
Good for you. Yeah, I was thinking about this. Like, I mean, what's the rule saying you have to cook this dry ass bird on like any of these holidays?
I thought it was a rule all up until this last Thanksgiving, and I ventured forth, ate some lasagna, and like, damn, I guess I didn't need to eat this dry ass bird.
Yeah, was it like just one of those like pre-developed store-bought lasagnas, or did you
No
make
way.
it from scratch?
My uncle has like he makes it in like giant quantities. He like just to give you some, because he freezes it and saves it
Can't
for later.
imagine you have any Italian roots though. So
Do I not look the part? You don't see my olive skin?
yeah, okay, yeah. Yep, you look like a typical Guido.
Yeah. They call me Jeffredo. Dude, he like, just to give you an idea of the quantity, 8 gallons of sauce for the lasagna. So that, like
nice.
that kind of, yeah, and it's amazing. It's like best lasagna I've had, but that's what we had.
That's so like sauce is so crucial for Italian dishes. You know what I mean?
It breaks it.
And I feel like a lot of times when I have to order like pizza and stuff, I have to make sure I order extra sauce
I always
every
do.
time, because
You do that too?
Oh, every time, dude, because it's just like they're stingy with it, you know?
Yeah.
And always like I love when you get like breadsticks and they give you those bitch ass marinara.
I know.
Cups. I'm like
2 dips and it's empty.
yeah, I was like, that is half of a breadstick of sauce.
Yeah.
Like I kind of dig Little Caesars, how they give you like a literal cup.
Yeah, it's a cup.
I like
Little
that.
Caesars has it right.
Yeah, they do. I mean,
Why is it like? Why are they so stingy with it? It's like
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Well, and I like there to be a pool of sauce when I'm done with my meal.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and I was wondering, because I thought like Italian food was just kind of lazy in its own little way, because I was like, well, pasta is pasta, and I mean, really, what you're doing is changing the shapes of that pasta and then telling me it's different stuff.
Yeah, rigatoni.
Like, spaghetti
Yeah.
and macaroni and rigatoni and tortellini, and they're all the same
Just
thing.
Different shaped noodles.
However, my Ed, Ed, his mom was she half Italian, and his grandma was from Italy, like an immigrant from Italy. And she told me, his mom told me that the reason why they have like the whole power of the different names is that the noodles are designed to pick up the sauce differently.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's why they're different dishes. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And then, of course, you do different sauces for all those. But yeah, more sauce. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because it's always so funny to me when everybody tells me about their way of cooking a turkey. See, what I do first is I marinate it, and then I do a good rub. And I'm like, this is a ton of effort to make this horrible piece of poultry tolerable. That's really all you're going for, is tolerability.
My wife's not big on turkey either.
Well, dude, I was like thinking to myself, I was like, yeah, well, you know what? If I inject it with like Creole butter and then I deep fry it, it's delicious. I'm like,
so's everything.
A raccoon turd would be good if you freaking took it and injected it with Creole butter and deep fried it. Like, I was like, I'm gonna get away from turkeys altogether, because that was the other funny thing is,
was that Tim?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. The Creole butter is like, that's kind of a when you're doing injectables, it's like, I even think that's the name of the company, is Creole butter. Oh. Yeah. But but you just inject all the, everything and then go from there. I mean, I like, I don't know, when I was back in starting like in my like undergrad, I lived with a guy that Adam was at, Adam, one of the co-owners of Alpha. He was at dinner with the other night, and he was making fun of me because he said, yeah, every Saturday that guy cooked a turkey. And I was like, so here's the reasons why. I was super poor, right? Just like every college kid was. And
you were a meathead.
Well, but do you know how cheap turkeys are? They're the cheapest thing on planet Earth. So like, that's why I would every weekend I'd go buy a turkey. I couldn't afford anything, but I could afford turkey, and I'd cook it. And then after that I'd put all the pieces into just, Tupperware, and then I'd eat turkey sandwiches the whole week. And I did that for like 2 years, No
wonder you hate it now.
Well, no, that's not it. I love turkey sandwiches, but that's because they're drenched in mayonnaise.
Yeah. You
So,
the other stuff.
but it's like, everything. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, that turkey. So when it was so funny this year when people were like, oh yeah, the supply chain problem and turkeys are up 20%. I was like, oh no, they're gone from $13 to $15. Whatever will we do? Like
that's true. They were talking about maybe just don't have turkey this time, which we didn't have turkey this time, and we broke the mold, and it was great.
Well,
it wasn't because of the two extra dollars.
Here's the thing, though. Like, there are meats, and like chicken's great, but there are meats on this planet that require no special attention other than fire.
Yolk.
And they taste awesome, right? So, like, if I have to go through it's almost like when you have to dress up a beer, like a Blue Moon is
Like an
only
orange
good when
slice
you
in
put an
it.
orange slice in it, and a Corona is only good when you put a lime in it. Like,
Yeah.
that should be good on its face, not have to add a bunch of
100%
Right.
agree.
So if you have to do all these things to make this thing tolerable to put in your face, then is it really that good?
Right.
Because I can put a T-bone on the grill and cook it in no special attention whatsoever, and it's awesome every time.
Yeah, as long as you cook it right, it's amazing.
So I'm going to encourage our listeners to break away from that for the Christmas years. Just get away from thinking you have to cook a turkey, and like at Christmas, I'm going prime rib. I'm going to smoke it for 8 hours,
Yep.
and I have more investment.
Oh man, prime rib.
So good.
Yeah, dude.
So good. Yeah. That's cool to hear that you got rid of lasagna, though.
Yeah.
Did you have to deal with any unruly family members or anything?
No.
No?
Yeah, my uncle's he made himself a wine cellar. It's amazing.
Oh,
And
cool.
Yeah. He's just kind of went and hung out down there, and yeah, no
Big
unruly family members.
Big wino?
No need for trying to tamp down emotions around politics or anything else that kind of happens around the usual holiday.
What are you talking about? There's no politics stuff going on.
Yeah. Real placid cultural climate right now.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of
What about you? I mean, people firing it up around or is everybody in your family kind of see things the same?
well, I hurt my back, so.
Oh yeah.
I know, yeah. So I was, and this was the day after I hurt my back. So I was just trying to focus on not being like, it only happens like, I looked at the last time this happened, it was like 2 years ago. And just every now and then, and I know it's because I have horrible like technique when I'm bending down, I think the day, because I'm trying to put some weight on now with lifting. And so I was doing chest the day before. There was a lot of dumbbells, and you have to bend down to get those. And I just wasn't lifting with my legs. And so then the day after, I was doing a lower back row, and it just
That's where it happened.
well, it was.
So
I was
it's
just,
like a typical bent over row.
no, not a bent over row. This was the one you sit down, and then you're
That hurt your back.
So this is what's weird about it is it's most of the time a relatively innocuous like action on my end that causes it. So I'll just be like, for example, one time I was just sitting on the couch doing nothing, and then I felt a muscle spasm, and it it feels like lightning is going through your back. It's so horrible. And then it's painful for at least 2 days, to the point where I got to get a back brace on, and then I can kind of take some of the pressure off of it, and then it just relieves itself. And then day 3 or 4, it's usually like, when you like overwork a muscle and it's just kind of achy.
Yep.
Feels like that. And then now is a full week and a day later, and I feel a little bit better.
Damn.
It's kind of fortuitous, though. I mean, it happened right when we went on break, and I had some time off, so I just laid up and
Just chilled.
played some new video games with my kiddo. So
Yeah.
good stuff.
Hell
But
yeah.
no, I didn't really. If there was any drama, I certainly missed it. So that doesn't mean I don't deal with like it. Because Christmas is coming up now, and that tends to be a time when I get more people together. And yeah, that's for anybody listening here. One of the things we wanted to talk about today was, how can you communicate? Because these things come up, and I think taking the approach of, well, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion when family comes around.
And I think money too. Is
And
one
money.
Of those.
Yeah. That's probably so. I think it becomes like that whole pink elephant concept, that when you say, don't do this, we're not going to talk about this, then that's kind of what everybody has on their mind. So
yeah.
I'm kind of more of the idea, just embrace it. Now you can embrace it without becoming upset or angry with one another. I mean, now clearly you can't control the other people, but definitely you can control yourself, right? In these situations. And the thing I don't want to have happen is somebody to feel like they weren't able to talk about what they wanted to talk about and that their point was slighted.
Yeah.
When they come into these situations.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever just been at a gathering and bit your tongue, not because you didn't dare make your point, but because you didn't want to ruffle feathers or anything?
Yeah. It was more, it was for good reasons though, because they were, so one of like occasionally, for those of you who are listening, occasionally Jeff and I, or any of our counselors for that matter, will work with a high profile client, right? High profile meaning that they were in the news, not that they are a celebrity, but that their case was, I suppose, infamous enough that it caught the attention of the public eye for a period of time. And then they came and did treatment with us. And so on one occasion, a topic came up and they were discussing like the case of a client that I was working with. And I was like, oh, I can't say anything about this, because I had privileged knowledge of the case and I didn't want to share a lot. Now, I walked away from that feeling like I wish I had done something about it, at least said something about it, because the way that it was, I think that they were basing their opinions and everything off of a lack of information, whereas I've had more information from the client and I got more full context of the story. And you can have an opinion on anybody's behaviors or activities one way or another, but you should have full context of the information so you can then make an informed decision. But I couldn't provide that, obviously, because I wasn't going to break confidentiality or anything like that. Right. So that's been a time when something like that came up. What about you?
Yeah, so this is like the weird thing. This is like a personal flaw, I guess, I have to work on among many.
Yeah, they are vast.
Got a lot of them. People are talking politics. I'm a pretty opinionated dude. I've got thoughts on things. I've got feelings on things, and I really try to look into and back up and have reasons for believing the things that I believe. And there'll be times where I hear people talking, and even if I agree with them, sometimes the reason that they're like, if I could agree with them on some type of position that they hold, and the reason that they believe what they believe sucks. Like they believe the right thing for the wrong reason, I guess, or people that I disagree with completely, and they're talking about just some mainstream media talking points or whatever, and I know that I've got a good rebuttal or a new way for them to look at it or correcting information, but I have yet in my life to change anybody's mind on anything when it gets into one of those types of discussions. At best, we have a spirited debate. I go away thinking I won. They go away thinking they won. At worst, it leads to hard feelings. And I've been on the other side of that, to where there's hard feelings, and not on my end. Like, I can agree with you. I can be diametrically opposed to you on a belief, and I might make fun of you or talk some shit, but like, we're still buds. But I've been on the other end of it.
From your perspective.
From my perspective.
But they may not feel the same way.
Right. And that's happened. And so I'll bite my tongue, and I'll just I'll let things pass by. And then it's like, I feel like a coward for not saying what I believe. But then when I think further about it, it's like, Mars, not that I'm a coward. It's that maintaining the relationship is more important to me than proving my point. So I just shut up.
Okay. So it's kind of like one of those, do you want to be right or do you want to be in a relationship?
That's it.
Type situations. Okay. Well, I mean, that's a good example of, and I mean, I've had other examples too. More recently, that's just the one that I had, but I like what you're saying, because, so for anybody who's practicing a new skill, and we tell this to clients all the time, it's like, look, like some of our clients who are, currently incarcerated in an institution, right? They will routinely tell us that, the skill that we're trying to teach will not work with some of the officers with whom they interact. They say it won't work, and they'll give us a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Most of which have to do with the other side's behaviors, right? So they'll reference an officer being too hard-headed or stubborn or an asshole or whatever, right? Now, that may or may not be true. I don't know, because most of our clients have their own social problems to begin with, social skill problems to begin with. What I say is, well, we can't really control how the other person goes, right? We learn these social skills a piece at a time, and the only thing you can do is follow through with the social skill as it was designed and based on, the appropriateness of the situation. Now, after that, how the person reacts is really on them. Right. And how the person reacts really kind of determines what I do next. A lot of times that then requires that I use a different social skill. I don't double down on this one. Maybe I shift gears. Maybe it turns into a personal coping strategy for me. So I think the risk here that we run about not communicating with family members or anybody in any of these social situations and doing it in an assertive way is what you referenced, was you feel like, you didn't assert yourself, and it's almost like you kind of, chickened out and let yourself down in the moment. That's what we're trying to avoid, because that you can control. You can at least, and like you said, don't be a dick. That's never good for a conversation, because then the attention turns away from whatever point you're trying to make to you being a dick. And then it's all, nothing really comes out of it. So the question is, can I communicate assertively, but then maintain some dignity? And then if the person gets, their feelings hurt or whatever, okay. I mean, that's on them. I want that choice to be theirs, not because I forced it in that direction. Well, you know me, I can be really mean when I want to. And I try to stay away from that, because then I know that was deliberate on my end and it had nothing to do with, providing a cogent argument for whatever my point was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why we were going to talk about communicating assertively today and kind of share that skill. This is a skill that we teach our clients who are incarcerated in substance use, sex offense, in the jails, in the prisons, all these things, to kind of do some of these things. What I'm curious, what was your, when you were learning about assertive communication? Because it kind of, at one point or another in our lives, we're all going to hear, there's 3 forms of communication, or no, 4. There's passive, there's aggressive, assertive, and passive aggressive. Then they give you a little dumb cliched example. I mean, what was your kind of first exposure to it?
That
horribleness.
Yeah. It's the 4 communication styles: assertive, aggressive, passive, and passive aggressive. And the way I first learned it was the message that each of those communication styles sends. And so, assertive sends the message, I'm okay, you're okay. Passive sends the message, you're okay, I'm not okay. Passive aggressive says, I'm not okay, you're not okay. And aggressive says, I'm okay, you're not okay.
Right.
And that's kind of the way I learned it.
Wait, what is passive aggressive?
Is neither of us are okay.
Right.
I don't have the balls to bring it up with you, but also I'm saying, I'm communicating.
And I'll slash your tires later when you're not looking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and it kind of I always I love the canned assertive statements, right? So they'll have a canned assertive statement that says, I feel
when you
fill in the blank of the emotion.
Yeah.
When you fill in the blank, reference the behavior that, is causing the problems. And I would appreciate it if fill in the blank on the desired behavior. I'm just going to say,
give an example of how that would sound.
Yeah.
If you didn't like that I was doing something.
I feel hurt when you insult my hats, and I would appreciate it if you'd kill yourself.
It starts out all nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's the problem with that? Because I know how I feel internally when people talk like that.
People don't talk like that.
That's what. Yes.
So,
it feels phony as shit.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've done thousands of sessions at this point, groups and individuals. I've never once those words in that sequence have never come out of my face ever. So I think assertive communication is not so much about the content of your words so much as the style in which you're delivering them.
Okay.
Right. So, And assertive does not have to mean this is the part where people come across. This is where it gets kind of tricky because, like, think about it like this. So we all know passive isn't good. We all know aggressive isn't good. But if I talk about assertive, what do you think? Do you think people, and I know what assertive communication sounds like, but from just a layperson's perspective or a person who, I don't know, might be misperceiving it, do you think it leans more aggressive or leans more passive?
It gets conflated with aggressive.
Right, exactly. And really, what I think you should do is when you think about assertive communication, it's about confidence. Confidence in what I'm saying and that I want to get my point across to you in terms of the meaning of my feelings and my thoughts without being aggressive. But that doesn't mean that I can't feel confident when I'm communicating with you.
So it's about what so you're saying if you project confidence, well, I mean, like, okay, well, so because you could also project confidence aggressively, and so I guess what would the differentiation be in, like, or are you saying that if I project confidence aggressively, it's not true confidence because I'm using, like, I'm puffing up on you, and that's not true confidence because I'm compensating with puffing myself up?
Yeah. I mean, certainly you can get what you want out of people sometimes in terms of being aggressive, right? But choosing to be aggressive versus choosing to be assertive, I mean, that's a choice. So my behavioral choice to now be this way may result in the outcome that I desire, but it doesn't do much in the way of building our interpersonal relationship. So assertive communication says, yeah, if I demonstrate confidence in not just the content of what I'm saying to you, but also in the way in which I'm delivering it, then again, I always tell clients this too. Using a social skill, this is where it gets tricky, is because we tell them, here's a social skill. And, the reason why we do this is we're trying to increase the likelihood that you're going to build more fruitful long-term relationships, right? It's not a guarantee. So anybody listening to this can't think that just because you use this skill appropriately that it's a guarantee, because interpersonal relationships rely on me and at least one other person. And unfortunately, I don't control the other person's interpretation of how this is coming across.
That's kind of what you were referencing when you're saying that a lot of times we'll teach these to clients in a facility and they'll say that would never work on Officer Johnson because he will do X, Y, Z. What would you, like, the way I say it to him is like, I just kind of come off that, well, explain what you just did, that, there's another person involved in this, but it boosts your chances.
Sure. And I say certainly with that attitude, this is never going to work. So in short, it's worth a shot. Now, if they respond, I mean, I would want to know how they respond, and this is where we bring them back. So we give them a skill. We ask our clients to go practice this, and then we ask them to report back to us of how it worked. And the reason why we do that is because we want to troubleshoot. I mean, was this a delivery problem in terms of how you delivered it? Was this contextually just not a great idea to use this skill in particular?
Bad timing.
Right. Or is, because the reality is yeah, other people sometimes are assholes and even the best social skills will not work on them. Okay. Yeah. It does increase the likelihood. And so that's where I say, and that's good information too, by the way. Like if you're asserting yourself and demonstrating a good communication, and every time it comes off to the other person and they get rubbed the wrong way, well, that's their choice, right? And that's their interpretation. We can't own that. So what that does, though, is that tells me who this person is. And if I know kind of how this person has reacted across the spectrum of all of our conversations, well, then I then get to choose how much I want to engage them or not engage them in the future, because I know that, and how I treat them in the future. So it's predictable, and with predictability comes an element of control. I can control the level of communication I'm having with this person because I don't want to get into a fruitless argument that's just going to result in everybody getting so that helps me understand that when I want to take a step out from this particular topic, I'm not doing that because I don't want to assert my point. I'm doing that because I know it's going to fall on deaf ears, and it's going to destroy the conversation anyway, and everybody's going to have a good time. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with making a decision not to assert myself, not because I I didn't get my point across and I feel like I didn't hold up my dignity, but because it was the best option for what was happening at the time. And I made the right decision by not screwing everybody's night over.
Right.
Yeah. So kind of how we look at this is when we when we think about the skill, one of the things we want to ask ourselves is kind of think about a time when, someone didn't think about your feelings and how you handled that. So to me, I think about times in which somebody hasn't really thought very much about my feelings and how I handled that.
This is step one.
Yeah, this is just a way to bring this up to a client. And, and anybody listening is start to think about a situation in which somebody didn't think about your feelings and how you handled that. And, I think about sometimes when we're dealing with government entities, right? And, maybe they're coming back at us or griping at us because we didn't fulfill something on an agreed scope of work that we're doing. And we have legitimate reasons why that didn't happen. And we're providing them with an explanation of, well, we did this, and usually it's a failure on another party that we had zero control over. And so everything that we're doing on our end is trying to communicate. Maybe it was because we didn't see a client or something like that. And everything we're doing is trying to communicate why this didn't happen. And there are legitimate reasons why it didn't happen. And rather than validating that and saying, oh yeah, that sounds really difficult and really tricky, it sounds like you guys made a lot of effort, and then moving forward with some sort of idea of how can we problem solve this in the future, which would make me feel better about it, they just dismiss it and say, well, this is your obligation, you have to follow through with this. I'm like, well, okay, but how at that point? I get what you're saying, but under certain circumstances, I really truly don't know what I'm supposed to do. So, getting into specifics is irrelevant. I'm just saying that those are times when I feel like my feelings and my thoughts are not being heard and or validated, and it's just like, oh, I don't care, that's your problem. I'm like, well, kind of. But I think.
Would you say that if you're on the receiving end of that, hey, you guys aren't doing your job, this client wasn't seen, that's your responsibility, people might get confused as to if that's assertive or aggressive. You're saying that without treating, without both parties feeling like they're on an equal playing field as far as being able to troubleshoot and problem solve, and that would be aggressive on their end, or would it? Is that, or does it not matter what?
I think it's almost just I don't know if this is a style of communication, but it's just very dismissive, we're not going to validate it. We're not going to acknowledge that you did make the efforts. It didn't happen, and so that's your fault. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, unfortunately, that's not entirely true. Now, the next question to kind of think about is, were you able to express yourself in the moment in time, right? So question one is, has there been a time that you felt somebody didn't acknowledge your feelings, and then were you able to express yourself at that moment in time? And this is where it gets tough, because you can't say what's on your mind at that point in time, because if certain people control funding, or you don't want to get blacklisted or something like that, then you hold your tongue, and it really turns into one of those, okay, thanks for the feedback. That's all you can really do at that point. And whether it gets, whether that's where that gets, and a lot of this goes through emails. So I have to imagine to some degree that when you're thinking about official lines of communication, people want a paper trail to which they can refer at a later date in case the worst happens for liability purposes. And I get that. Not that anybody's deliberately screwing anybody over, but it would be nice to just have a conversation about this and be validated from time to time, So I think that folks listening to this, clients or, anybody, practitioners, or just, general public, is that's kind of where to start, and then acknowledge how that feels, because that's why assertive communication is so important. Is even if somebody doesn't acknowledge my feelings, you're going to increase the likelihood that they are going to acknowledge your feelings if you communicate assertively.
And I just real briefly, not because I don't want to get off on a rabbit hole with this, but kind of in the same vein, that I think that speaks to how it's so easy to misinterpret things when it's written communication as opposed to a conversation like you and I are having. Tone is tough to interpret, and in a written correspondence like through email, it's there for official purposes, liability, CYA, all of that. But like it without, I guess, a real focus on trying to make it clear that you're acknowledging their feelings and beliefs, that it's easy for a strongly worded text message or email to completely derail what could be a good conversation.
Right. And I think so on that end. Now that's me using some mental gymnastics on my end to kind of excuse, I guess you could say, or just provide an alternative explanation for what I'm reading in that email, is I just remind myself it's an email. So really the idea of this is, hopefully anybody listening knows this, but if you don't, none of these social skills work within the context of sending a text message or
that's probably worth saying.
Email. I mean, even
why is that?
Well, for exactly the reasons why you just said. It's not just tone, right? Like because tone is one thing. I can pay attention to tone, but tone has a few different elements. Tone is defined by kind of the nature of the words that I'm using, but also like the tone or pitch of my voice, volume, like cadence. Those things are all really important, which people don't pay attention to. Now, the part that is also left out, and this is, I think equally important, is I got to pay attention to body language, particularly facial expressions. Okay, body language as far as, and I'm not a huge believer in this body language expert stuff. Like when they're asked a question and they scratch their head or something, I'm like, he may have just had an itch, for God's sakes. Like,
he looked down to the left. It's like,
right. Who cares? I mean, I don't know. Yeah. And I'm an idiot when it comes to that stuff. So who the hell knows? What I am saying though is on a more subtle or a more obvious level, I guess I could say, not a subtle level. I can interpret an aggressive posture of another person, and I certainly can look at a facial expression and get a sense of where they are. I mean, not always, but I can get a sense of where they are in terms of how this conversation is going by a facial expression. So I would say, at the very, very, very least, this should be a phone conversation with the other person, don't you think?
Yeah.
Because at least then
you're getting some kind of feedback.
Yeah, you're like 75% of the way there, and you have more information than you did simply through an email. So, I'm not saying now throw out your social skills when you're going through email. What I am saying is filter your interpretation of what they're saying through that prism of, well, this is an electronic medium of communication, and I should not apply tone. In fact, why not just give them the benefit of the doubt every single time in terms of tone, right? Like that makes more sense than
start with giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and then go from there, because you can always look at something as, like just put some nastiness on there. Yeah. Of course, you got it, right?
Yep.
So yeah, when we kind of move on, now we do have some steps to this. Looks like we have 4 as far as this goes that you and I have kind of.
Are you showing this to the viewers?
No, okay. No. So, and I suppose we could, right? I could whip up a quick write this thing down type situation or whatever. But yeah, we could do that, right?
Yeah.
Let me pull this up. But can you think of a time when I don't know, recently, when somebody hasn't really validated your feelings?
I was expecting that question to come up, and I just have a hard time holding on to things. I can't probably off the top of my head. I can't really.
Yo, no. Everybody validates my feelings.
Yeah, everyone validates my
all
feelings
the time equally. That's okay.
Yeah, legit. Just not able to come up with one.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I stole yours. That's why you didn't.
I mean, yeah, that would have, because it's an example. Yeah.
It definitely is. It definitely is something that I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard to pay attention to sometimes when these things come up.
Dude, we have the type of job though to where like we just can't take things personal doing what we do for a living. Forensic social work. When we're meeting with clients that are court ordered to talk to us, they don't want to be there. A lot of them, at least at first.
Oh, come on. They all want to be there. What are you talking about?
Yeah, look, after a month with me, they love it. But
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's like a necessary trait in our line of work to have a real short-term memory when it comes to that stuff. It's like with football. I don't know why this reminds me of this, but it's like kind of common in football to that. What makes a good cornerback, not quarterback, but cornerback, is having a real short-term memory. I mean, running a 4.3 40-yard dash also matters, but if you get burned for a touchdown, you can't let that get in your head. You have to be right back and say, okay, I got burned, forget it, move on. And I think that we have to be a little bit like that as well. And so, I mean, if I stopped and thought about it, I could probably come up with something, but I don't know. I've kind of conditioned myself to, unless it's real egregious, to kind of water off a duck's back.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Well, so here's kind of step one, and we'll go through each step individually. So step one is decide why the situation could lead to conflict. And so this is a thinking step. So initially, and when you think about, we have two different types of steps. We have thinking and action steps, and sometimes we have thinking and action steps. The way that I've always communicated this is a thinking step is one of because you're doing something. I mean, you are, it's not the verb, it's not the action language that's telling you that this is a thinking versus an action step, because you're deciding, which is a verb. But outwardly, nobody should be able to observe you doing this.
Right.
This should be internal. And are you slowing this down to a ridiculous degree? Well, yeah, of course you are, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to slow down the process that I'm reacting to a situation. I'm trying to slow that down and give it some steps, so then I can hopefully insert some of that control over my behaviors, and I can assertively communicate myself. So when people are like, does this really happen? Well, yeah, but you are so unaware of it, because your mind is working so quickly that we don't really acknowledge this. But this is the step one for assertive communication, which is decide why the situation could lead to conflict. So I guess the question on that is, like, what are some situations that have the tendency to lead to conflict? Like, what are the ones that come up the most when you're talking to clients? Like, under what circumstances do we often see the conflict happening?
Like a client therapist conflict could be, I want to, I want to go be with my family on Christmas, but underage kids, safety plans, not at the right spot in treatment yet.
Oh yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's a good kind of a good example, especially for the time. So a lot of our clients, especially those who have been convicted of a sexual offense, they will, they have to often put safety plans in place, and those safety plans have to be approved by multiple parties in order for them to kind of go participate in the exact situations that we're talking about that lead to conflict sometimes. So my therapist I'll get into that initial conflict with my therapist because maybe we disagree on it and kind of go from there.
Yeah. And like, just to further illustrate it, like a client that's newish to treatment may well not be able to be with their family on Christmas.
Right.
Because they haven't achieved the right steps yet. And that's a big fat bummer for people.
Right.
And that leads to conflict between therapists and clients all the time.
So, and it, clearly conflict is not limited to that situation. We're just giving an example. So we'll use this for the context of our conversation. But for those of you listening, step one is think about this, why the situation could lead to conflict.
So I might say, I, as the therapist, have to keep safety in mind. I have to adhere to the program parameters. I need to make well-informed decisions that even though I maybe want to be accommodating, that there's bigger goals like, maintaining the safety of everybody. And from the client's point of view, they might feel that they're perfectly safe. They are better off going home. It's important to be with family, and that maybe even it's lower risk for them to be with their family because they're happy around the holiday time. So I think that would be sort of the why the situation could lead to conflict.
And the hope is that when I'm using this skill, that the other person is using this skill as well. I mean, consistent with what I'm doing. Now that can't always be the case, obviously. So, I mean, and I think if you're a counselor, you look at this and you say, well, yes, sometimes we make decisions that's in our client's best interest that they don't believe is in their best interest. Right. And so this becomes difficult. Now, that kind of goes to step 2, which is determine your ultimate goal for this situation. Okay. So now, ultimate goal, the one thing I think about this is your goal might have a couple of different parts to it. So like as a therapist, when I'm thinking about that might be something as simple as, well, I want to validate my client's concerns for why they're not allowed to do what they're allowed to do, or why I have to deny their request. I want to make sure that my point is coming across, that where my decision is and what my recommendation is, but I also don't want to damage the relationship. So I have kind of like 3 different goals, all of which are positive in my opinion, but I need to kind of think about what's the type of communication that's most likely going to get me all 3 of those goals, because I can certainly do other things that could meet one, not the other 2, or anything like that. So as you're going through this, the one thing to do is to really think about what's your ultimate goal as far as these things go. I mean, am I missing anything as far as a therapist side of that?
No. And I think that's, so the goals that you mentioned are good examples, because it's not overtly obvious how to meet all 3 of those goals. As therapists, we have to thread the needle a bit in being able to find that the way to achieve that ultimate goal. And so because again, it's not overtly obvious. How do you simultaneously maintain rapport with the client, get them to understand where you're coming from, validate where they're coming from, but hold your ground? It's not easy, but the ultimate goal would be able to maintain the relationship and make sure the client is on board with following through on not going home for Christmas.
Right. And I think if you're just in like a normal situation with like your family members too, the part that I like about that in terms of the goal is that you're also considering the other person's thoughts and feelings in the matter. Like we're concerned about how our communication style is going to come across on them, because we want to maintain the relationship. Because this is what this is what I kind of tell clients a lot of the times is that, well, if this is a person with whom you don't really want a relationship, then why are you wasting your time? Move on, keep walking. Right now, there's a matter of want to, and there's a matter of have to. Okay. And or maybe not, so like officers, for example, in a jail setting or a prison setting, my client can easily tell me, I don't want to have a relationship with that guy. I get it, but they control a lot of your day-to-day activity, and the small privileges that you have, and this could be in the community too, with say like a PO, or even with my counselor, some of the small privileges that I do have, or the permissions that I do, they are contingent about the quality of this relationship that I have with this other person. And so that moves it away. You should want to have a relationship with that person. Not that you guys are going to go to each other's weddings or anything like that, or each other's barbecues or whatever, but more so that I want to have a civil working relationship with this person because it benefits me. It benefits me in terms of getting the things that I want in life, and it's mutually beneficial for them because it helps not have closed lines of communication when the other person is trying to assess, how well I'm doing or my danger or anything like that. So that's kind of the thing is if this is some stranger off the street, you don't need social skills. Just keep walking. You don't need to use this relationship this is for, again, trying to bolster or maintain social relationships that you feel are important or already exist and that you want to maintain for whatever reason. Okay. Just something to think about when you're working with this. Cause I
was gonna say, I've heard you call it preferred relationships versus important relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I prefer to spend time with some people, and then there's people I don't prefer to spend time with, but it's really important that I have a relationship with them.
Right.
Especially in the case that you're talking about. It's in the client's best interest to consider me an important relationship, and it's same on the inverse.
Right, exactly. So that leads us to step 3. Step 3 is brainstorm what you could say that would help you reach your goal. And we have a kind of a unique way of looking at brainstorming. So like when we train other clinicians on this, the way we teach, like brainstorming, is it also useful to think about, I don't know, bad ideas when we brainstorm?
Yeah.
Why? Why is that?
Well, in addition to making for an entertaining group when we teach it, a lot of times if you come up with something outlandish or a bad idea, you could say that it puts all variables on the table once we know like kind of the extremes. Okay, well, how do we work from there? Also, sometimes a bad idea might jog your mind into thinking of a really good idea that you might not have otherwise considered if not for the bad idea. Like ultimately, by not censoring yourself on the ideas through which you brainstorm, you're allowing your brain to kind of step outside the box, so to speak, and to come up with a lot of variables. And then once we have a lot of variables, we can trim the fat and find the good ones.
Right. Kind of the way that I look at it is, okay, some of the things that we, I try to say that in the past we talked about that all human behavior is not arbitrary. Like there is some sort of perceived or actual incentive towards whatever we do, right? Now, sometimes I think it's difficult if whatever we're doing is simply just kind of breaking even. So sometimes my assertive communication or whatever it is that I'm doing, I don't really see an incentive, somebody doesn't jump out of a bush with a trophy and like, you did it, or anything. No, nothing like that happens. Sometimes I just break even. I don't really get any good outcome from this, but I also don't get like any bad consequences coming in this. So the reason why I think it's useful to think about like bad options when I'm brainstorming is because you kind of trick yourself into recognizing the incentive in breaking even. Because you think about it like this. You have 2 different tracks in terms of your behavior. Your behavior is going to result in a positive outcome for you and the other, hopefully for you, okay? And the hope is that mutually the other person has a positive outcome too, right? The other one is avoidance of negative outcomes. That's about as good as it gets sometimes, right? So those are the 2 incentive structures. You get a positive outcome or you avoid a negative outcome. I mean, we don't want negative outcomes. That's not incentives. But avoiding a negative outcome is an incentive.
Are those not always the same thing?
No. Avoiding a negative outcome does not require that I have a positive outcome.
Okay.
Because avoiding a negative outcome, again, might just break even. I haven't really moved the needle, but I certainly haven't gone backwards, right? Which, in my opinion, you should have an incentive for that. So it's kind of like I trick myself into thinking that there's an incentive because I look at what the negative behavior is and I see, oh yeah, that would result in a negative outcome. So choosing not to do that is taking me from, -5 to 0. I know 0 is way better than -5. There's my positive outcome. It's simply the avoidance of a negative outcome. So when we look at 2 decisions and we put the bad decision against the good decision is bolstered by looking at the consequences of the bad decision.
That makes sense.
Right. So when we juxtapose those 2 things, we say, oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense to do that. I'm not really moving the needle my way. I don't get any new things coming into my life, but at least it's not that, and that's incentive. That's incentive for behaving this way, right? So that's kind of how I tell clients, yeah, brainstorming is effective. You may think that you understand what to do first, and that might be what you do, But don't dismiss what you could do in terms of bringing negative outcomes because you want to highlight that if all you're doing is breaking even. Yeah. And I think that when I don't know, I've had some pretty good success when I bring it up to clients like that, especially because they think sometimes their efforts are fruitless, and they're kind of like, I don't even want to do that. I'm like, okay, I'm not saying you're going to.
But they don't want to go through the effort of brainstorming it because they already kind of have what they think they're going to do.
Well, right. And you, like what you want out of this goal, you may not get it. So like, for example, if I have a client wanting to go to a holiday party and there's going to be a lot of people at this party, and maybe this is a substance use client, and per our discussion, we've discussed the fact that the eggnog is going to be spiked, and Uncle Joe has a marijuana card, and all the reasons why sometimes they'd have an unnecessary risk exposure if they went to this holiday party. My client wants to go to the holiday party because they want to see their family. But at the very least, like, I could tell my therapist to F off, if I wanted to. And I look at that and I say, well, if I do that, I'm going to insult my therapist. I'm going to damage the relationship. On the other hand, if I just accept what they're saying and express how bad that sucks and process those feelings, I don't get what I want. I want to go to the holiday party, but damn, I don't ruin the relationship with my therapist. And that it's better than nothing.
Right.
That's kind of where that lands. So once that's all done, we get into step 4. And step 4 is choose the best way and express yourself.
I feel upset when you don't let me go to the Christmas party. I'd appreciate it if you'd reconsider.
Exactly. Some nonsense like that. And look, what I would say is, can you just express yourself honestly? That's the most important thing.
Not worrying about the I feel statements.
Right. Yeah. It's irrelevant. I mean, I hate that magic like language that somehow like if you just somehow plug in I feel, it solves it. And then of course they find a hack for that because I feel you're an asshole.
Yeah,
well, like it's like
exactly.
Well, now you're starting over and you're like, so only I feel statements in this group. And I'm like, yeah, that can be hacked immediately. Just stay away from those things. Like the whole point is, can this person express themselves honestly? Now, maybe that they use some colorful language, okay? And as a therapist, like you said, I have to have some thick skin associated with that. And we can talk about the use of language for future relationships when I'm working with somebody. But at that point, I don't really care. What I'm looking for is genuine expression of emotion. That's it. That's all I want, and not an aggressive matter, non-threatening, just like so. That's really kind of what that boils down to in terms of the benefit for our clients is really going through that and expressing yourself. So I don't know. It just seems to me that this is not an opportunity to get caught up in like, I don't know, naughty words, like
right.
It's just
right.
Because somebody could be genuine and non-aggressive and still use the F word. Unfortunately, it's doable, totally doable, So I don't know. I mean, therapists always, I was asking my students about this, and we had a conversation about this the other day about swearing in groups, and somebody brought that up, and of course, you had one side, and there was a small minority who said nope, they should use appropriate language in groups. And I'm like, I don't know what appropriate language is, and then others said no, you should let them talk any way that they want, which I don't know. I mean, there are certain things you probably ought to not say in groups,
I can think of a few.
Yeah. So it's somewhere in the middle. I do want you to express yourself genuinely, and this is your session after all. And so I think a therapist is limiting anytime you start placing behavioral rules on the content of the conversation, you're really limiting your client's ability to express themselves fully. So just be aware of that. You do your sessions however you want, but that's kind of one of the things. If I put limitations on that, then unfortunately some of our clients, their language is limited to some of those things, and that's their best way to express that.
And they're not going to learn to speak assertively if you limit them. Go back to that, the what you typed up there. Those four.
Yeah.
So just kind of so when we're teaching this to clients, step 4 is where we actually, that's the action step where, you'd actually say whatever it is you decided to say. I mean, notice that there's 3 thinking steps before all of that. Mm-hmm. And again, the temptation is to jump right to saying the thing that you want to say. Mace, earlier you talked about how this is definitely slowed down and drawn out. This process doesn't necessarily happen in real time. But again, if I'm deciding why the situation could lead to conflict, the benefit there is I'm now taking the perspective of another person. And I have my reason, but I'm having to anticipate why they might feel the way they feel. So I'm already going to be toning down the potential aggression in what I have to say, while at the same time reinforcing why I think it's worth bringing up. And then, step 2, that's, it's tough to have the exact thing to say that's perfect, but if we have goals, even if they're goals that seem like they're mutually exclusive, if you're considering like, okay, at the end of this conversation, once I say this thing, here's the desired outcome. I want this to be the desired outcome. I can't control that, but some potential ways that I could do that are as follows. And then I'd brainstorm. I could do this, moderate thing. I could do this moderate thing. I could do this crazy ass horrible thing. You know what? Yeah, maybe I'll just do the moderate thing here. And then that's finally, once I've thought through all that, I've weighed my options, then finally I'll open my big fat mouth and then I'll speak.
Right. And when we train this in groups with our clients or even in individuals, I mean, this is for like one client and one skill, it's a 20-minute conversation.
Right.
And this, the point of that, and I think what you were saying is really important, so I'm glad you brought it back up. The point of that is you're taking something that happens in less than 3 seconds and turning it into a 15-minute dialogue between you and the client to really break it down, which is useful. Because if they don't do that, then really that is the best mechanism that we've come up with for slowing our thoughts down and being able to, and this is all for the future, because trust me, what I'm not suggesting is that you, in real time, pull out a handout and start going through this when you're trying to communicate something. The idea is that in a controlled setting, and you guys can do this on your own, like listeners, you can do this on your own if you want. Those steps are readily available, and you can practice this just by thinking about those situations. And sometimes you can look for previous situations. Most of the time, we look at situations that are about to happen that we know we have to use assertive communication, like holiday parties. And we say, okay, practices and play it out in your head how it's going to go, almost like athletes do when they're trying to play out how a play is going to go, right? And then that's the best, and then practice it, slow it down, think it all the way through, and you are increasing the chance and the probability that you're going to use the skill in real time when that situation comes up. And without that, then there's no better way to do it than that. Perfect. So that's just one thing that we kind of, I think is useful for our clients. So, I hope that that's helpful for you guys, because definitely, as these things come up in the future, I'd like to hear if there was if anybody tried this skill. I task any of our listeners to do this. Try the skill, particularly if they have a difficult family member, with whom they're going to be spending some time during either Christmas or New Year's or whenever, and then tell us how it went, because
maybe we could share any interesting messages that we get from you guys.
Right. And we will do the same thing, because then that I think will help us deconstruct it. And that's what we do with clients. We troubleshoot, we wash, rinse, repeat. And then, sometimes we will just conclude, maybe that wasn't the best skill for that moment. And then we kind of go from there.
Right.
So, okay. Well, folks, that's everything we have on assertive communication. Want to say anything else?
Nope, that's it.
That's it? Okay. All right. Well, I guess until next time, when are we recording our next one? Don't we have a guest coming up here soon?
Possibly.
Don't even say it, because then we jinx it.
That's true.
So we won't even say a guest.
Yeah.
We will have a new podcast coming out soon.
There you go.
The end. So, and soon is within 1 year.
Yeah. We can stick to that.
Okay. Later, guys. And thanks for listening to the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast with your hosts, Jeff Moore and Mace Warren. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into all things related to forensic psychotherapy. As always, you can head over to utahsbesttherapy.com to check out our program and check out all the links and resources in the show notes. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and wherever you prefer to get your listener fix. Please share this episode with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating, which really helps us out. You guys are awesome. We'd like to stay and chat longer, but we're lying. Good night.